Good evening, friends. We start tonight with mounting tension between the United States and Russia. The State Department announced today it is suspending cooperation with Russia over Syria.
Russia and the Syrian regime have chosen to pursue a military course inconsistent with the cessation of hostilities, is demonstrated by intensified attacks against civilian area, targeting of critical infrastructure such as hospitals, preventing humanitarian aid from reaching civilians in need.
With ties between Moscow and Washington increasingly strained, the Russian foreign minister has said a deal between the two countries on Syria is in limbo, blaming the US for a lack of clarity. US-Russia tensions have escalated since the breakdown of a ceasefire last month, and the Kremlin said the US failed to separate moderate groups from jihadists. The foreign minister said agreements are hanging in the air right now to a decisive extent because it's unclear how Washington regards the actions of the opposition, a whole range of opposition groups.
Bilateral relations have taken a turn for the worse for the US and Russia. Moscow has suspended an agreement on the disposal of surplus weapons-grade plutonium. The Kremlin said unfriendly acts by the US towards the Russian Federation pushed President Vladimir Putin to sign a decree halting the agreement, which came into force in 2010. Initially signed in 2000, the agreement committed both sides to destroying 34 tons each of plutonium, enough, Washington says, for approximately 17,000 nuclear weapons. The material was to be burned in nuclear reactors. Putin's administration has submitted to Parliament a draft bill outlining conditions it wants the US to fulfill for the deal to be resumed. These include reducing US military presence in countries that joined NATO after September 1st, 2000, and calling for Washington to lift all sanctions against Russia. The government is also demanding compensation for damage caused by the embargoes.
Breaking news for you now. Tomorrow, 40 million Russians will be evacuating to bunkers for a nationwide emergency drill. The big question now is, what do they know that we don't know? According to Stefan Stanford at All News Pipeline, he reported, quote, that the recent story from Pravda tells us that Moscow, Russia, which has a population of about 11 million, is now prepared for a possible nuclear attack upon their country. Now, the whole population of Russia is about 143 million. Now, they state that they have enough underground bomb shelters in Moscow for the entire Russian capital, which basically tells us that 100% of the city's population will be able to be protected as a result of new approaches to civil defense. We're also told that their bunkers are completely maintained, stocked, and ready to go should they be needed due to a, quote, man-made or emergency nuclear attack. Now, the official release from Emercom Russia declares, quote, the Emergencies Ministry of Russia is going to organize an all-Russian civil defense drill from the 4th of October through the 7th of October of this year. They state in this release more than 40 million people, more than 200,000 specialists of rescue and recovery units, as well as 50,000 units of equipment are going to be involved in executing the drill.
If you're wondering how our politicians and other super rich people really feel about how things are going in our country right now, then listen to this. Upscale sales at Rising S Bunkers, a company that specializes in fancy underground bunkers, have increased a whopping 700% this year. That's according to Gary Lynch, the company's owner. He told The Hollywood Reporter that actors, pro athletes, and politicians are all investing in high-end bunkers like there's no tomorrow. Literally. For an unnamed Oscar winner, he just installed a 37-room, 9,000 square foot underground complex in Napa Valley. The bunker includes a bowling alley, sauna, jacuzzi, shooting range, and massive home theater. It cost more than $10 million. Another customer with their own television show just built a $10 million complex of underground mansions in Minneapolis. But it's not just eccentric actors building luxury bunkers. Bill Gates, the guy who's supposed to be saving the world, is also preparing for its demise. He reportedly has huge bunkers under every one of his homes now. Pro athletes are also big customers, but maybe the most interesting customers on the list are the politicians. Not only are they making enough money in the field of public service to buy luxury bunkers, but they are making the bunker makers actually sign non-disclosure agreements. The politicians don't want anyone to know they're preparing for the end of the world. The bunker makers say all their clients think we're doomed, no matter who's elected.
Tonight, a new warning that Kim Jong-un may try to provoke the U.S. and send a message of intimidation sometime in the next month, around the time of the November election. The warning comes from the Center for Strategic and International Studies, CSIS, and is published on its website, Beyond Parallel. The group says for some 60 years, Kim, his father, and grandfather have demonstrated a pattern of trying to incite tensions around the time America votes. Just this year alone, Kim Jong-un has fired off 15 missile tests, 2 nuclear bomb tests, making 5 overall. What could be next?
I think it could be a 6th nuclear test. It could be launching of their rocket to put a satellite in orbit, which demonstrates ballistic missile capability. Doing a major test would be a way of trying to intimidate the incoming president.
Whoever is president will face an increasingly dangerous North Korean dictator.
Los Angeles Police Department has issued a citywide tactical alert following the police killing of an African-American teenager over the weekend. On Saturday and Sunday night, protesters took to the streets outraged over the death of 18-year-old Carnell Snell Jr., known as CJ.
Police department there just issued a citywide tactical alert. A citywide tactical alert in Los Angeles. The question, is Los Angeles about to go up like Charleston? According to Susan Duclos for the All News Pipeline, now she reports that we are seeing with increasing frequency, another police-involved shooting, and it's being used as an excuse to bring in outside agitators, much like what we saw in Charleston. Now they say this is in order to create protests and chaos by inciting more racial tensions across the United States. She writes that from one end of the country to another, we have been witnessing a planned attack on America from groups like Black Lives Matter, funded directly by this man, George Soros, in order to create civil unrest. You know, she writes, he's made a career out of this all across the world in order to implement his idea of change within America to usher in the New World Order.
And parents are demanding answers after their kids were sent home with this white privilege survey. Seniors at a high school, at Oregon High School, asked to react to a series of racially charged statements. One example, because of my race or color, I can go shopping alone most of the time, pretty well assured that I will not be followed or harassed.
Newspaper endorsements may not matter much these days, but it's striking that such conservative editorial pages as the Dallas Morning News backing Hillary Clinton, the first time in 75 years the paper hasn't endorsed a Republican for president, Cincinnati Enquirer, which has supported Republicans for nearly a century, San Diego Union Tribune more than a century. And then we have the Arizona Republic, which has never backed a Democrat for president since its founding in 1890 and has been very critical of Donald Trump. The Republic senators say they've gotten a wave of cancellations along with some death threats. And also USA Today taking an election stand for the first time in its 34-year history, saying Trump's unfit for the presidency but not backing Hillary Clinton.
A leading figure of the Al-Qaeda militant organization has been killed in a drone attack. The person, known as Masri, spent years in prison in his native Egypt on charges of plotting with the fundamentalist Islamist groups, and he later left for Afghanistan. The U.S. Defense Department said Masri was the target of a U.S. airstrike near Idlib province in Syria on Monday, and he died when his vehicle was hit in the rebel-held area.
Officials said Monday that a radio station used by ISIS to spread extremist ideology in one of the cities it conquered has been bombed out of operation. A spokesman at Iraq's Joint Operation Command told NBC News that the Al-Bayan radio station was one of the strongest propaganda tools for the militants inside Mosul, Iraq. He said broadcasting stopped Sunday after the station was bombed by Iraqi jets. The spokesman explained they used to broadcast Islamic anthems that encouraged people to join them and to stand against the government and encourage people to be terrorists under the name of jihad.
Troops from India and Pakistan have exchanged heavy fire and targeted each other's positions on the line of control dividing Kashmir. The conflict started around 11 a.m. local time on Monday in the Shahpur sector of the frontier Poonch district. Indian officials say 2 civilians were wounded due to the firing from Pakistan's side, and they have retaliated to the attack. Pakistan's official broadcaster also accused Indian forces of restoring to unprovoked firing in Nezapir sector.
Pastors across America came together Sunday to fight a piece of legislation called the Johnson Amendment that limits what they're allowed to say about politics from the pulpit. Conservative group Alliance Defending Freedom held an event called Pulpit Freedom Sunday. The group is fighting for a new bill that would address the speech restrictions imposed by the Johnson Amendment. Churches currently risk their tax-exempt status if they speak out about a political campaign. So far, 4,100 pastors have signed up for the protest.
California Governor Jerry Brown signed a bill into law Friday that makes it illegal to distribute recorded conversations containing confidential information from healthcare professionals in the state of California. The bill was introduced after anti-abortion group the Center for Medical Progress attempted to expose Planned Parenthood's donation of fetal tissue to research companies last year. After state investigations, Planned Parenthood was found not guilty of wrongdoing. The man and woman who went undercover to obtain the recordings were charged in Texas with tampering with government records for creating fake IDs and attempting to purchase fetal body parts from Planned Parenthood. The charges were later dropped. Under the new law, only the individuals who make the recordings will be prosecuted, excluding journalists who might aid in their distribution.
Black Monday in Poland. That's the name of this nationwide protest by women angry at proposals for a total ban on abortion, even if someone's been raped. They stayed away from their schools and offices to register their disgust. The centre-right government's bill would create some of the most restrictive abortion laws in Europe. Speaking in Warsaw, Barbara Nowacka, the leader of the United Left Party, accused the ruling Law and Order Party of supporting medieval barbarism. "We don't want this. We will stop and expel the fanatics," she said. The current law allows abortions if the woman's life is in danger, if there's a risk of serious and irreversible damage to the fetus, or in cases of rape or incest.
As hopes faded of a swift deal with U.S. authorities over a multi-billion-dollar penalty, Deutsche Bank shares resumed falling on Monday after recovering from a record low at the end of last week. With the Department of Justice demanding a fine of up to $14 billion for mis-selling mortgage-backed securities, the German lender is throwing its energies into reaching a settlement before next month's U.S. presidential election. Though its shares didn't trade in Germany on Monday because of a public holiday, its U.S.-listed stock was down around 2.8% at mid-morning.
The UK's Chancellor of the Exchequer, Philip Hammond, has said there is economic trouble ahead as the government negotiates the country's withdrawal from the European Union. His statement comes after Prime Minister Theresa May announced on Sunday that the government will trigger the formal mechanism for Brexit by the end of March next year. Triggering Article 50 of the EU's Lisbon Treaty means the UK will have 2 years of negotiations. Hammond said he expects turbulence
is set to introduce further austerity measures in its 2017 budget at the request of international lenders.
Tonight, Hurricane Matthew already deadly and closing in on Haiti, now packing 140-mile-per-hour winds, at one point the strongest Atlantic hurricane in nearly a decade. But it's the storm's slow speed, moving at just 7 miles per hour, that makes it so dangerous. We made our way into Haiti today from the neighboring Dominican Republic.
The outer bands are already starting to bring heavy rain, and the worst of the storm is still hours away.
Parts of the island could see more than 3 feet of rain, potentially triggering deadly mudslides. Making matters worse, 6 years after the disastrous earthquake of 2010 that left more than 200,000 people dead, more than 50,000 people here are still living in makeshift shelters. And at this orphanage outside of Port-au-Prince, they've boarded up the windows and moved their more than 60 children to the second floor. The storm has already killed at least 4 across the region. In Cuba, the U.S. military has already evacuated 700 military family members from Guantanamo Bay. This man warns residents to evacuate. Long lines are forming for food and supplies. Worshippers of this church pray they'll be spared. And with odds increasing for a landfall in the U.S. later this week, states of emergency have already been declared from Florida to North Carolina.
Heavy flooding in the Democratic People's Republic of Korea has damaged or destroyed 30,000 homes and affected at least 600,000 people. Video footage taken last week shows hundreds of displaced residents living in temporary shelters in North Hamgyong province. Aid groups have called for help ahead of the winter season. According to the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies, residents are in dire need of permanent shelter and health services. Access to food and safe water is also a problem. The group has launched a $15 million emergency appeal to provide aid for the next 12 months.
After the many embraces that welcomed Pope Francis to Assisi, embraces of peace from the representatives of the religions of the world taking part in the World Day of Prayer for Peace, dialogue was taken up in the refectory of the Sacro Convento Friary during a common meal. In the afternoon, 450 representatives of various religions separately prayed for peace in different locations throughout the city of St. Francis. During the ecumenical prayer among Christians, Archbishop Justin Welby of Canterbury and the ecumenical patriarch Bartholomew I of Constantinople both offered meditations ahead of a reflection by Pope Francis. Before Christ crucified, the Pope said in his remarks, "We Christians are called to contemplate the mystery of love not loved, and to pour out mercy upon the world. We are called to be trees of life, like the cross, which transformed evil into good, in order to absorb the contamination of indifference and restore the pure air of love to the world."